the reality when it comes to the Kayayei Saga, the abuse they face, and how a lot of us are turning a blind eye to it. Thank you for staying with us, and that's our next conversation. We host Edith Asamani Wase. She is a development consultant. We also have Hajia Lamnatu Adam, a Tamale-based women's rights activist. Ladies, thank you very much for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Okay. We also have Justice Beidu, my colleague who put together this investigative piece, this documentary, and he'll be sharing some thoughts on what exactly went into it and what his discoveries were as we talk about this situation. So starting off the conversation, I believe I'll start with you, Hajia, on this very beat. Now, for a while, I think, so I'll start with you, Edith, instead. For a long time, for decades, I've read stories about Kayayei, this north-south drift, this entire phenomenon. And I'm just looking at it from this angle because it's been so long since even I was in basic school and read about this phenomenon, but it still is what it is. What do you feel are the contributing factors to the Kayayei situation? Why do you think we still are where we are?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that the contributory factors are varied. They move from sociocultural. I know a lot of people blame poverty, but then there are also elements of sociocultural norms in there. People blame poverty because, of course, a lot of the girls and the women move from the rural communities to the urban centers because they feel this is the place where it's for greener pastures. This is where they've had their business pass through in Agbogloshi, in the Medina markets, and that's where they feel they could make it. They could pass through the same means that their mothers and sisters have gone through. But then there's the other factor, which is the sociocultural practices. I have personally spoken to a number of Kayayei who have told me they actually came down here because they were running away from child marriage. Some of them are running away from female genital mutilation. I remember I spoke to one lady, I withhold her name. She was 13 when she got married. And her parents gave her out to an older man, and she had to run away because then there were the issues of abuse. She got pregnant. She just couldn't take the whole situation anymore. So she had to come down here. So it tells you that we cannot deal comprehensively or address the situation if we do not start addressing the situation from the roots, where they are coming from. Is there a way of ensuring that the places that they are coming from have all the things they need to thrive, all the things girls need to thrive, all the things boys need to thrive? How is their schooling, their educational prospects like? How are their economic prospects like? How are their health prospects like? Are they living in a place where they wouldn't have to move to look for better opportunities? That is one. And then the second thing is, how do we ensure that some of these harmful, that we actually deal with it? We work very well with the traditional leaders, with the faith-based leaders, with the parents who have grown up with this culture as part and parcel of them. How do we ensure that we deal with all of these issues in different facets so that these girls feel like they can thrive in their own homes and not come here and endure all the abuse that they go through on the street, and restore some of the abuse that are meted out to them in Injustice's documentary. But then there are other dimensions, like how do we ensure that even if people came here, we packaged the Kayayei phenomenon so that it becomes a proper business that does not harm people, rather than them just coming here and going through all the things that they go through. So this is my thoughts on
your initial take.
Why this has gone.
And it's very interesting because then there's a whole lot to digest in there. Even if we want to maintain it, what are the measures we're going to put in place to ensure that they are not abused? We'll be getting to the bit about the comprehensive things we have to do at the tail end when we're looking for solutions or proffering them. I'll come back to you on that. Do we have Hajia Lamnatu with us? Hajia, are you with us? Okay, so when we cross over, because I'd wanted to find out from Hajia, she is, she is at the forefront of this, where she comes from, and I would have wanted her to expatiate on the story when it comes to the Northern Belt and some of the other factors that may contribute to this. But let me come to Justice Baidu, who put together this piece. So, Justice, walk us through this. What was it that you discovered, unearthed? Some of the things that we don't get to see when it comes to the lives of ordinary Kayayei. I know, for example, Valentina Roberts, who is in the shot right now, was only 12 when she left Tumu in the Upper West region. She was in JHS 1, came down south, and tell us a bit about her story.
So, good morning, and good morning to everyone watching. So Valentina, whose story we have been following for quite a number of days, as you said, is from Tumu, and she's only one of thousands of Kayayei people living in Old Fadama, which is the nearby slum to Abugulushi, a major market where I'm sure a lot of us buy foodstuff from. So now she basically lives the life of thousands of other young girls. So this series basically has 5 thematic areas looking at education for young girls and boys sometimes that are cut short because of Kayayei, the poor accommodation. And I tell you, I was in Old Fadama for about 2 weeks working on this, and the sort of rooms where
Justice, good. Okay.
You cannot even breathe in. You cannot even breathe in some of the rooms that these girls live in.
Wow.
There is terrible stench. There is heat. There are some rooms that girls sleep in, and you have about 12 of them, like Valentina, sleeping in a room which is literally 2 by 2 in inches or in measurement, and all you have is basically where to lay your body. And basically these rooms have no windows. They live in these places that the community itself does not have running water. There is no toilets, basically no services at all. And you have girls younger, way younger than Valentina, some 8, 9, or even 10, doing this job, living here. And it's a terrible situation.
So I was about to ask about the youngest you had encountered, and you talk now about 8, 9, and 10. So 8 being the youngest as far as this hotline documentary is concerned that you encountered. Was that the youngest age?
Yes. The youngest that I spoke with was 8 years, and it's even hard to verify their ages because a lot of these girls really cannot speak English, and it's hard to understand them. I've been working with a fixer who translates their ages and everything. But yes, I mean, they told me their age. Tomorrow, we will be putting up a photo series on my Joy Online with details children between 8 and 10 who are doing Kayayei and living in conditions worse than the one that Valentina lives in, having to dread men who basically rape young girls.
Right.
Basically rape young girls in some of these communities.
Right, and it breaks my heart even as we talk about this situation. We'll get to the bit about rape because that's another dimension, another level of abuse that these Kayayei go through. But just to situate the conversation very quickly, when you spoke about even these spaces, no services at all, but they still have to pay, right? They pay certain people to be able to reside in these kiosks and others, from what I gather. Is that correct? And how much do they pay?
Exactly. So places like Old Fadama and Agbogbloshie are really controlled by what you could describe as sort of mafia groups. It's mainly a no man's land, and so it's survival for the fittest. And the people who have been able to secure enough space for themselves to be able to build these small shacks, tin shacks that people live in, are the ones who are benefiting. A lot of them do not even live in the slum themselves, and they come in over the weekend to take their monies from these girls. So in the room that Valentina stays, for example, they have to pay 70 cedis every week to be able to stay there. And so
how many are they, and how much are they contributing to get these 70 cedis? How many were they?
So there are 12 of them. Right. Sleeping in one room, which is smaller than the average room, actually with no windows. And this room also contains all their belongings. So 12 of them, actually one girl has a baby, so technically 13. And then they also have their belongings in that same room. And they pay 70 cedis a week. And so at the end of the week, they will divide that among themselves and then make that payment to the person who owns the land.
So that's very interesting, because I'm just doing some quick mathematics here. It would mean if they were 12 or 13, that would mean they would be paying something close to 6 cedis a piece to make up for the said amount. And that's very interesting because, again, per Valentina's story, she makes about 40 cedis on a bad day and about 50 cedis on a good day. So it just breaks down the dynamics for you. Right before I cross over to Edith again, I want to find out from you. Edith spelled out some of the motivations. Some of them are running away from the cruelty of child marriage. Others are coming down because they want to make something for themselves. They want an education. They want to get an apprenticeship or learn a trade, like in her case, where she wanted a sewing machine. Are there any other motivations you found out in having this discourse with them? Are there any other motivations?
I think everything that Daniel has said, I think that everything that Esenam has said is very true. But for me, as a journalist, having traveled and worked within Northern Ghana for at least 10 years, I would put all of this down to 1, poverty, 2, poverty, and 3, poverty. Everything else is a symptom and a result of poverty. Girls being handed out for child marriage, for which reason some of these girls should be running away, is because of poverty. Families have more than 10, 15 children to take care of. Half of the year in Northern Ghana, there's nothing to do because there are no rains, and really farming thrives on rains because there are no dams to work with. And so, for half of the year, if there's no food to eat, young girls, cash crops because they are then handed out for marriage. And then what comes out of it is used to feed other siblings. So basically, it is the poverty that keeps driving these girls out of their communities. And so, yes, all of the things that you have spoken about are very true. But then the root cause for me is the poverty. And between tomorrow and Friday, you will see within the 3 other episodes that are left how basically the poverty and the need to be able to just survive is the cause of this menace.
Okay, I'll have you hold it there, Justice. So it is clear one major consequence or one major causal factor, grinding poverty, causing them to drift down south. Let me come to Edith now. If you followed Valentina's story, she works from around 4 a.m. in the morning till late at night. Now, my question for you, are we protecting our girl children enough, especially considering child labor regulations and international agreements we've signed on to as a country? Are we protecting our girl children enough? 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. Valentina was 12 when she left Tumu. What are we doing? Are we doing enough?
Obviously, no. I don't think I'd be doing myself, my sisters, my mothers, my friends any service if I said yes. I appreciate and acknowledge the fact that a lot of organizations, a lot of agencies, civil society groups, some that I have worked with, development partners, even donor agencies, including our own Ministry of Gender through the Domestic Violence Secretariat and all the various agencies under them, are doing, some things just to ensure that girls and women are protected, especially who we call marginalized groups, the Kayayei, and being one of the major marginalized groups in Ghana. I think we can do more. I think we can do more in terms of ensuring that those who really deserve livelihood skills get them and get out of the street. I think we can do more to ensure that even if we were supposed to look at Kayayei, like I was saying from the beginning, as a good place to make some economic gains, how do we ensure that the women, not the girls, because the moment girls are engaged in labor such as this, within the time frame you have mentioned, it becomes hazardous labor. How do we ensure that if women decided to be part of this and are seeing this as a place of work, how do we standardize it so that they only carry a certain weight of things and we brand it such that it becomes, because I know that there are a number of apps that have rebranded this concept such that you sit in your home and then they buy your things and then they bring it. Nobody gets hurt, nobody gets harmed, everybody is healthy, they close at a particular time. How do we ensure that these girls know how to do these things and rebrand themselves? So I think we are not doing enough to protect girls and women. The girl's place is not on the street. A girl's place in school with her male friends, to study, to make the best out of her life. And if a girl decides that I have finished senior high school, her place is not on the streets. Her place is either to get into trade, to learn a trade, to become a huge businesswoman, or get into, just literally ensure that girls and women also fulfill their potentials, because they are humans too. And Ghana is one of the countries that we hail for having made some progress with regards to the Sustainable Development Goals. But as a Ghanaian, I don't think we should continue hailing ourselves if we are leaving so many people behind, because one of the taglines of the Sustainable Development Goals is that we should leave no one behind. And it's quite unfortunate. I feel that these girls have been left behind. I think one of the ways we can ensure that the girls are not left behind is by working together. Let's not work in silos. What the ministry is doing is good. What the agencies are doing are good. What the civil society groups are doing are good. But if we're able to harmonize all these interventions and get more coverage, let the interventions reach more girls, I think then we'll be making some headway, because the efforts we are making are only targeting a few hundreds and a few individuals that are getting out of the streets or making it back into school. So yeah, we are doing a great disservice to girls and women, and we must do more as a country.
What you just said reminds me of something that the gender minister, Sarah Joasafo, said, that no woman is going to be left behind. That's the Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, that no woman will be left behind. How about our children, the females who are drifting down south? Are they being left behind? I'll be coming back to you, Edith, but before I do, I just want all of you to watch excerpts from this piece.
Besides me, my space with your folia, I could do a la magana, I'm a tessa, a moment man. Lies you for it, some amateur fire. The sometimes no one afford to go 50 to 60. So I got my lunch home traffic. When you then I be the Tamale station. I be cocoa board. The man lunch home and can. Like none more was no now that's for sorry. Not because one was on my sorry. Or has you could clear back on the baby I could say. I was a boy. The not a pancake more blue. the child blessings, I'm almost increasing. And the one who get motor station school is the open for city. And the one who get down a cocoa board. In similar and solar, I used to do that even to the 25. My sister and a bullet found and so I'm very quite down. My son, I would tell a rose, I would tell him a little balance to tell on the home. And no say obey permit and wow, was it a movie? Moka Dama, I'm a chonkaya, I'm a yama trankana, I can't quite dear, may yama trankana wow. You can go on over smart yes, you go over was the salo telephone or Adaha or Papa apprentice and dog. And the Bible told Samuel near a Masala movie, a compaha, a chonkaya, Allah. I'm a young tailor, I can go dear. But that's my area and rabble, Melkoa, but now we are speaking to more support. And to our market for Kaya, man, now I'm a Sakakia, you are Comodia, but now we are no way for level own. Maybe now I can move your concord. No way for that, but some game is coming enough.
And that is the plight of Ghana's human shopping baskets. Yes, headquarters, or Kayayei, as we call them. I'll be coming back to you, Edith, and my question is simple. If some of these girls feel maybe they've not got an education up to the age of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and they feel learning a trade is the only way to go, how do you think we can empower them? Because in the case of Valentina, whose story we just shared with you, bits of it, she is constantly being bombarded by family up north to send them money out of the 40 cedis minimum she makes every day. How do we empower these girls, especially if they don't want to go to school? How do we empower them to learn a trade or something?
All right, so I'll use my experience in working in the development sector and some of the examples I have seen that people have used to empower girls like Valentina. I have seen very, very successful mentoring programs for Kayayei, where we've ensured that Kayayei are linked to people that have ever been like them and have made it. I remember there was the Chief Justice Mentoring Program that I think Paige did with a UNFPA. It was so successful. Then there have been other opportunities where girls have been taught how to make soaps, have been taught how to make slippers, all the things that craftsmanship comes with, which does not necessarily harm a girl or take her out of the normal work hours that somebody who should be in apprenticeship. Our Children's Act says that if you are 15, you can be in apprenticeship. Someone who should be in apprenticeship should have. I think that we have opportunities of helping the girls do this. The problem is, how do we ensure that if they have the livelihood skills, they will be able to create demand and viability for marketing their products where they are? So as for the empowering them, it's not a problem at all. It is how to create viability or demand for the things that they make. How do we package those things so that people will be interested in buying them wherever they are? And I think that's the next step that we ought to look at when we talk about empowerment. And empowerment doesn't happen only when you teach skills. Empowerment is a process of also training them to understand assertiveness, also training them to understand their rights, so that when a guy comes to them on the streets and says, let me sleep with you and I'll protect you on the streets, they actually say no. And I have actually seen rapid response centers being launched in the Agriculture and Medina markets to ensure that the girls are able to report such cases. So the empowerment process is a holistic process. And like I said, all hands must come on deck to ensure that these girls and these women get the kind of skills that they need, if that is really what they want to do.
Okay, let me quickly cross over now. Thank you for joining us, Haji Alamnatu. You're a women's rights activist, and you've been in communities where some of these things have happened, and young girls have had to drift down south and gone through horrifying experiences. I just want to take the conversation back a notch because we didn't get you from the start. What are some of the factors that you feel are still contributing to this downward drift where these girls end up as Kayayei? We've spoken about poverty. We've spoken about child marriage. Are there any other factors that you see are contributing to this problem?
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that poverty and child marriage have come up because many a time you see that girls will elope because of them being exchanged for marriage.
Right.
Another factor which I'll say is that girls also are asked to come there so that they're able to, get some assets back home. So you hear a lot of them saying that I've come to Accra or Kumasi so that I'm able to get a sewing machine, or I'm able to get some kind of clothing or let me say bowls back so that it can help me in my marriage, because back at home, my parents will not be able to support me on that. Then also one other factor is also the long dry seasons that we have at the north, which limits women and girls' ability to further engage in economic activities. So you see that when the rainy season stops and farming activities stop, the only alternative is to ask that some women or girls come back to the city to start fending for themselves. I will also say that sometimes, although we don't really look at it as a problem, infrastructure can also ask these girls, to migrate. Many of our communities, you have basic school just up to primary 6, and you have the JSS in another town. What it means is that if a parent cannot buy a bicycle or go to rent a place for, a ward to stay and be attending school, she's left with nothing but to be prepared for marriage. And so because there's no junior high school to continue in those communities, and there is nothing, any livelihood diversification or skills that she can engage in, she has to be forced to go to Kayayei so that she's able to also even fend for herself and sometimes also give remittances back home, as we have seen. And so let me also not rule out that sometimes the girls also entice each other and they want to be experimental and adventurous, beyond the systemic issue on culture and poverty and all those things. We can also rule out the case of adventure.
Okay, I remember reading this fictionalized account of, Kayayei and some of the abuses they face. It's a story by Amadako. And one of the crucial elements in there is that of rape. Sometimes those who give them these places to squat and all of that, rape is rampant. I'm just thinking, they get raped, a lot of them, they get pregnant. You go to Malata and other markets, you see them with their children. The children are not being taken care of. They are not getting an education and all of that. What do you think we can do to stem the tide of that? What is the reality of rape as far as Kayayei are concerned? And what do you think we can do to stem the tide of that?
So you see that when girls go to live in these cities, then it comes to us a case of double jeopardy, because they are children themselves, and then they get to give birth to another child. And so they become 2 children for who to look after, And so it's worrying. You see age of 14, 16-year-old, and they have babies strapped at the back, carrying very heavy load. And that is worrying. I think that, like my other Edith Essinam talk about, we need a holistic, process to deal with this. We may want to consider having some childcare centers around the market, and also supporting the girls themselves on some soft skills, as she has mentioned, like confidence building and being assertive and knowing their rights, and especially knowing where to report cases of sexual abuses to. It's one way to support. And then also we need to also find ways to empower them around their sexual and reproductive health right, so that they are more prepared, and then they are not able to just joke around with their bodies just because they are being threatened by some boy or some man. And so we need a holistic issue to deal with it, because there are a lot of children there, and many of them also go through unwanted abortion and very dangerous abortions, and which affects them. Not to talk about the STDs, and sometimes they are also prone to having HIV/AIDS,
right,
and some other sexual reproductive health issues.
Okay, so there are said to be at least 6,000 of these Kayayei, or human shopping baskets in Accra alone. And even that is a conservative figure, about 6,000 of them. Let's proffer solutions in less than a minute each. I want each of you to have a bite in less than a minute. I'll start with you, Hajia. Apart from what you've said, what do you think, what other things, institutional, solutions, individual solutions, what do we do?
So I think that we must also look at what is the motivation for going, and try to make development even. Because if the district or municipalities in which they've come from, there are opportunities, I don't think they will go there. But for them that are there, I think that we need to have correct data of who are there and look at what specific needs they have.
Okay.
If some of them need training, then we have to support them, not also ignoring the other children that they have, given birth to.
Okay, thank you very much for making it very succinct. Edith, what would be your wrap-up solutions?
So in addition to what has mentioned, apart from the solutions back at home, it's also important that we address their needs whilst they are here in the cities.
Okay.
So we must ensure that they are well protected. We provide them shelter. We connect them to educational opportunities and to good health care. I like that she mentioned sexual and reproductive health issues, because they are one of the major. Importantly, get them to report abuse when they come across it. And this is not just an issue of Kayayei, it's a general issue in Ghana, and we must strengthen our response to sexual and gender-based violence in Ghana. So,
okay. Thank you very much, Edith, for sharing your thoughts. Do we still have justice? All right. So we're wrapping the conversation there. It's all about Ghana's human shopping baskets. The conversation continues.